hopefully I've made it clear that totally unlike the conditions in the animal kingdom, economic competition brings about is competition in the positive creation of new and additional wealth. And because of that, because of this inherent general gain as the result of the creation of new and additional wealth, there are no genuine long-run losers as the result of economic competition. No genuine long-run losers. I'll elaborate on that at length. Now, usually, we started out describing the way competition is viewed, survival of the fittest, et cetera, and the strong perish, the strong survive, the weak perish. That's how competition is so often regarded. Well, let's consider the actual effects of competition on people who are weak, who are sick, who are hungry. Consider, for example, what is the effect of competition among farmers and farm equipment manufacturers on the state of the hungry? What's the effect of economic competition among eyeglass manufacturers, among contact lens manufacturers, among the makers of laser eye surgical devices? What's the effect of their competition on people who cannot otherwise see? What's the effect of competition among the drug companies on the ability of people to recover from various illnesses? And the makers of prosthetic devices on the ability of people who are disabled to be functional. This is economic competition. Are the hungry, weak, sick, and disabled perishing as the result of it? Or what? What is their connection with this competition? They're able to overcome their hunger. They're surviving rather than perishing. They're able to see. They're able to walk. So when you look at it in this light, and if you think of what wealth makes it possible for us to do, I've already made the point weeks and weeks ago that we rationally value wealth in the name of being able to see, hear, do, think, and move. Well, economic competition is continually enhancing the ability of wealth to accomplish such results. And so its fundamental effect is not survival of the fittest and the perishing of the weak. It's actually enabling more and more people to survive longer and longer and better. It's enabling the sick, the weak, and the hungry to survive. That's the actual effect. Now, in point 4, I refer to, I make the point, how even the apparent losers gain. How even the apparent losers, there are competitions, there are losers of competitions, but in economic competition, even the losers come out gaining when you allow for the passage of a little time. We had a competition early in the 20th century between the automobile and the horse and buggy. And the horse breeders and blacksmiths lost. We had another competition going on at roughly the same time between farmers using horses and mules and other farmers using tractors. And the farmers using the tractors won. And those using the horses and mules lost. Well, what happened to the losers? Did they die of starvation?
Probably adapted to the tractors.
They changed their jobs. They couldn't go on making a living as a blacksmith or a horse breeder or growing crops with mules. They had to find something else to do, and the immense majority did. And once they changed their occupation, from that point on, once they learned to earn their living in a different way, what was the effect on them of the improvements that had displaced them? What was the continuing long-run effect on them of the fact that we now had a society where automobiles took the place of the horse and buggy, and where food was grown with the aid of tractors.
In the long run, it improved their standard of living.
Everybody's standard of living rose. People changed their jobs. They became able to make some kind of comparable income doing something else. And once they did that, the effect was that they gained from the very improvements that had initially displaced them. They gained in their capacity as consumers. So whatever you might have been doing, if you were a horse breeder perhaps, or a blacksmith, well, you might then have gotten a job working at a gas station, or maybe an automobile plant, or being engaged in some kind of industry, the demand for the product of which increased as the result of the availability of automobiles. And this is the basic effect of competition that enables even those who've lost the competition, once they change the way they earn their income, they are then in a position to benefit from the improvement that initially caused their loss. Their benefit will come in their capacity as consumers. Now, we need to investigate the phenomenon of short-run losses in somewhat more detail. This is point 5, the short-run loss periods. And I refer to differing effects on unskilled and skilled workers, and then also the effects on the losers of fortunes. If you're an unskilled worker, how long will it take you necessarily to acquire a comparable level of skill in some other line of work? It could be a few days, a few weeks, certainly not very long. Now, if we didn't have artificial impediments in the way of finding another job, the retraining time is really very, very short. So you have a minimal necessary retraining time, and that's really all the time that has to go by before unskilled workers would be in a position to earn as much income from another unskilled job as they had lost in the kind of work they had been doing. Well, from that point on, what would be the effect of whatever improvements had made their older work obsolete? What would be the effect on them once they had relocated? What would be the effect of the improvements that had made their older jobs obsolete?
Wouldn't they have a higher standard of living?
Then they would have a higher standard of living from that point on. They'd have a higher standard of living. So for them, the short-run loss period would indeed be extremely short. Now, there are other workers, various skilled workers, whom it's taken a more or less considerable period of time to acquire their skill, maybe 2-3 years, sometimes more. And in order for them to find alternative employment at a comparable level of skill, it would not be unreasonable to assume that they'd have to undergo a comparably long process of acquiring a new set of skills, another 3-4 years or whatever it might be. So what would that imply about the length of the short-run loss period for those workers before they could reasonably expect to earn a level of income comparable to what they had been earning, and then be in a position to most likely benefit from the improvements that had initially displaced them? Well, their short-run loss period would be on the order of what?
Months.
Well, conceivably, it could be on the order of 3 or 4 years, however long it took them to acquire their initial level of skills. But now notice, while that would apply if they lost their jobs and hadn't done anything toward acquiring new skills, then they might be out for 3 or 4 years having to go acquire those skills before they could come out ahead. But that assumes simply they've lost their jobs and now they have to start at that point to gain a new set of skills. what might they do before they lost their jobs?
Start acquiring new skills.
They could start acquiring skills while they still had their old jobs. Now, when you have any major improvement, it's not the case that people go to sleep Friday night, everything is as it was, then they wake up Monday morning and the industry in which they've been working is now wiped out, and there's something radically new that takes its place. The automobile did not wipe out the horse and buggy overnight. It took on the order of 20 years before that fully happened. So what does this mean for what most people working in the horse and buggy industry, or what's related to it, what opportunity did they have if they simply looked at the handwriting on the wall?
They have plenty of time to develop new skills.
Yeah, they could start learning something new before they lost their job. They could be taking steps then, and to the extent they did that, the burden of the progress would be that they had to acquire new knowledge and skills before they lost their job. And then, if they did it soon enough, at that point they could make the transition, just having undergone the period of study. I think that might apply to many of you in this class. Why are you interested in getting an MBA? Well, I'm sure part of the reason, at least for many of you, is you have some concerns about how secure is your job in your present line of work, and you want to take steps to make yourself more marketable, easily to be able to find another and hopefully better job. And so for you, the burden of progress is not that you're out in the street or having to work for years at a much lower paying job than you now are before you can acquire a new skill set. Instead, the burden is that you have to attend classes 1 or 2 nights a week. Maybe that's a worse burden, I don't know, but that's the form it takes. And it could be such a form for most people, so that the cost of protecting their ability to earn an income would be that they needed to continue their education throughout their lives. Now, if you think about that, in and of itself, that's really not so terrible. Knowing that you need to learn new things to protect your standard of living, well, that guarantees or will operate toward making people continue to think and learn. It stops them from becoming intellectually rusty. And I think that's something that's actually valuable in and of itself, just people continuing to have to think and acquire new knowledge. It makes for a higher level of the population overall. They don't just stagnate and never learn anything new. Now, let's turn to another category of people who may not have any hope of ever coming out ahead after they've lost a given competition. And this would be the group of people who lose an invested fortune. See, it's one thing to be a skilled worker and have your skill set made obsolete, but that's repairable. You could learn a comparable skill doing something else, and you might even do it while you still had your old job. But suppose you lose an invested fortune. I would think it's much harder for most people to reacquire $1 million than it is to learn some new job skill. So let's deal with a case. We have someone, let's say he had invested in a buggy whip factory early in the 20th century, and that's being made obsolete, so he loses his invested fortune. All right, A, is he going to die of starvation? No. What is the worst that will happen to him?
Lifestyle.
He'll have to earn a living thereafter as a more or less average type of worker. Maybe he'll be in middle management or something like that. Who knows? Okay, nevertheless, this is quite a drop. Now, even in a case of this kind, where someone started in life as a millionaire and then is reduced to the status of an average wage earner, even then, it would be possible, ultimately, for him to come out ahead of where he was when he still had his fortune. That would depend on how long he would live and how rapid was the rate of economic progress. But suppose he loses his fortune when he's 21, and the rate of economic progress is such that it won't be until he's 65 that he comes out ahead. Now, I do want to point out, incidentally, and stress that when you have economic progress, it is literally true that the average standard of living, the standard of living of an average person at a later time can actually exceed the standard of living of very, very wealthy people at an earlier time. And I would say today, the standard of living of the average wage earner in any of the advanced countries actually surpasses the standard of living of the world's wealthiest people just several generations ago. For example, if you consider the standard of living of Queen Victoria, I think she was probably the richest woman in the entire world in the late 19th, early 20th century. She did not have a television set. She couldn't go to the movies. She couldn't get an X-ray. She had no access to a personal computer. She didn't even have an automobile. She didn't have a telephone. She couldn't get antibiotics. She didn't have air conditioning. She didn't have any electrical appliances. Now, all of these things are readily available to the average wage earner in our day, in any advanced country. The only thing that Queen Victoria had that the average wage earner does not have is access to personal servants. That's what she had, and that's what you and I can't afford. But with respect to all the material goods, I would say without exaggeration that we are actually better off than she was. We're materially better off, I would think, probably than John D. Rockefeller was. He could live in a much more spacious home and have quite a few of them if he wanted, but he didn't have most of the products I referred to either. We do. And if we allow more time to go on, the standard of living of the average person, perhaps in 2050, will be greater than the standard of living of many millionaires today. Now, maybe it won't be. It depends on whether we continue to have economic progress and how rapidly it occurs. But in a free economy where you could expect a fairly rapid rate of economic progress, I think it would be true that 25, 35, 40 years later, the average would surpass the peaks of the earlier time. All right, but suppose we have someone, either he's not going to live long enough after his standard of living finally recovers. Maybe he'll only live 10 years after he's 65, or maybe his standard of living won't even recover till he's 75, and then he'll kick the bucket the next day. So he's not going to be around long enough to have a higher standard of living than the interval, the very long interval where he had a lower standard of living. Or he loses his fortune very late in life and just has no time for economic progress to raise the general level to where he was when he lost his fortune. So we want to look at things from the perspective of such individuals and ask the question, could they reasonably regard economic competition as a process hostile to their standard of living? Would it be rational for someone in that position to consider economic competition, I should have said economic competition, not economic progress. Could someone reasonably regard economic competition as a phenomenon as working against his standard of living? Because here we are, we've had an instance of economic competition, and thereafter his standard of living was reduced for the rest of his life. Well, what do you say?
How was that phrased again?
Okay, someone has lost an invested fortune. He's not going to be alive long enough for economic progress to raise the average standard of living to a point greater than his standard of living was when he lost his fortune. Can such a person reasonably consider that economic competition destroys his standard of living?
That's how he got his standard of living in the first place.
Okay, Mr. Zink, you were saying what?
That's how he got his standard of living in the first place.
Mr. Zink makes the point that the way this individual got the standard of living that he later lost was on the basis of successful economic competition. Either he or his father or grandfather had to be successful in a process of economic competition. That's how the fortune was acquired, if it was legitimately acquired. If you hold that context, that the fortune lost was created on the basis of economic competition, then the phenomenon of competition, considered all taken together, is not taking away anything that it didn't first create. You couldn't regard the whole phenomenon as hostile to him. But more than that, let's put that aside for a moment and consider what is the relationship of competition to the buying power of any level of wealth or income that anyone may have. What is the relationship of competition to the buying power, first of the millionaire's fortune and later of the average worker's income after that millionaire has lost his fortune and become an average worker? What's the connection of competition to everybody's buying power?
Increases their buying power.
It increased their buying power. It underlies practically the totality of their buying power. What would be available to buy if we took economic competition out of the picture, if we took away all of the progress of the innovators? That's what represents the great bulk of the competition. If that competition had not occurred, where would anybody's standard of living be? Where would everybody's standard of living be? It would be radically reduced. All of us owe practically everything to the phenomenon of competition. We owe our automobiles, all of the improvements in automobiles, the improvements in petroleum itself. All of this is a part of the process of economic competition. We owe the ability to get abundant, low-cost food. That's the result of economic competition. So practically the totality of the buying power of everybody's total income rests on economic competition. And when you see it in that light, economic competition is always an enormous positive in connection with people's standard of living. The reason that the average wage earner has the high standard of living that he has today compared with the average person in the past, that's the result of economic competition. The reason that the millionaire's million can buy as much as it buys, that's the result of economic competition. Now, if we keep these facts in mind, I would say that an accurate appraisal of competition when someone has lost an invested fortune is that one could say that at one time the gains this individual derived from economic competition were greater than they are later on. But even later on, when the gains are less, they are still enormous as far as economic competition goes. So you just think, here you are, at one phase of your life, you're a millionaire. So your gains from competition at that point are at their peak. Thereafter, you're reduced to the ranks of the average wage earners. Okay, now your gains are much less, but still, don't you have enormous gains from the process of competition?
Sure.
So what competition, when you've lost in a given competition, it is still not reasonable to attack the phenomenon of competition on the basis of your having sustained an isolated loss. What would be accurate to say is that the gains from competition are always immense, but it is possible for some people that at a later point in time they may be less than they were at their peak for that person. So it would be unreasonable for anyone to claim that economic competition is destructive of his standard of living as such. The most he could have in mind is that an isolated instance of competition has reduced his standard of living from a peak to a lesser height, but it is still an immensely greater height than would have existed without economic competition. Now, let me elaborate on point 6, where I say that it's opposition to free competition that implies the advocacy of the law of the jungle. It's not economic competition that's the law of the jungle. We've seen that that's the positive creation of new and additional wealth. But when one seeks to oppose economic competition, if one is serious about opposing economic competition, then I think implicitly one becomes an advocate of a real law of the jungle. Can anyone make these connections? How does opposition to economic competition, if you're serious about it and serious about stopping it, how does that imply advocating the law of the jungle? Yes, Mr.
Well,
Trexler.
you're reducing, well, in effect, you're going to reduce innovation just by the nature of attacking what may be supposed to be a monopoly. So maybe less people to enter that market because they don't want to get into it because maybe
You're saying if people are attacking competition, that will discourage
trailed
people?
off there, but that's
All right, is your point that if there are people around attacking competition, that will discourage some people from competing? Is that?
exactly,
Okay.
and discourage people from making more innovations.
That's possibly so, but how would that represent advocating the law of the jungle? Yes, Ms. Fox?
You would need the initiation of force
You need the initiation of force to do what?
to stop people from competing.
Exactly. If you want to stop someone from competing, do you think anyone will stop because you request him to? Imagine here we have the owner of a buggy whip factory, and Ford is making great inroads, and the income of the buggy whip factory owner is being cut. What do you think would be the effect if he writes a letter to Ford and explains, I still have my daughter that I want to send to finishing school, so why don't you hold back a few years and let me finish that before you put me out of business? Do you think now Ford gets the letter and he says, oh, poor guy, stop the assembly lines? So if someone is just making a request, is that going to have any effect? Well, what would he have to do if he's serious about stopping Ford's competition? He really wants it stopped. What will it take to stop it? Since Ford will almost certainly not stop because of someone's mere request. If you could blow up the factory, that would be one way. There might be a few people around who would be tempted to adopt such methods. They work for Tony Soprano, or they're similar. All right. One way would be the direct use of force, but that doesn't happen too often. A much more popular avenue is to go and get a law or regulation passed. All right. So if someone is serious about stopping another's competition, the only way it can be done is by force. And typically it would be force brought about through the government. That's the way non-mafioso types operate. Now, if you think about that, if someone wants to preserve his accustomed standard of living by means of force, well, that's the closest that people can come, that human beings can come, to living on the foundation of teeth and claws. If your method of protecting your standard of living is if someone doesn't do what you perceive to be to your interest, you have armed men go and remove him, which is what happens if you disobey any law or regulation and persist in disobedience. Then the armed policemen come and will take you away and put you behind bars at some point. And if you resist, you could be killed. Well, that is the closest that human beings can come to living by the law of the jungle, to live by force. Now, let's turn to the question of economic competition and economic security. I think typically people see a conflict. They think that we can have either economic competition or economic security. They think the two are incompatible. And I want to stress that economic competition, if you understand it properly, is actually the foundation, an essential foundation of economic security. If you really are serious about desiring economic security, then an essential requirement of having it is to have free competition. And there are two related senses in which I think this is so. A is competition and the physical security of having goods. Well, just think, what does it mean? What do we require to be secure from the wind and rain and cold?
Shelter.
We need shelter and clothing. What's the connection of competition to the availability of such things?
The more competition, the cheaper the stuff.
I think the more competition, the more abundant these things will be, the more readily available, and thus the more secure people will be. And think, where are people more secure against things like hurricanes, floods, etc., in an advanced country like the United States or in a place like Haiti?
Here.
Obviously here. That's because we have more wealth. That gives us the greater physical security, and an essential requirement of obtaining that wealth is free economic competition. So if we think of economic security, a major sense in which we talk about economic security is that it is the physical access to goods. It's the physical security of having goods. We are economically secure to the extent that we are in a position to have goods, to the extent that we're in a position to have the goods required to make us secure, to protect us from the wind, rain, cold, hunger, whatever. And competition underlies the introduction and production of these goods. Now, I have a reference to the paradox of the guild system. The guild system was prevalent in Europe in the late Middle Ages and early modern times, and it was a kind of labor unionism. It was similar in many respects to labor unions, with one significant difference, that the key element in the guilds were not wage earners, but small businessmen, small artisans working in different lines, haberdashers, producers of coal, cobblers, bakers, practically all of the different occupations were organized into guilds. And the basic purpose of the guilds was to provide economic security to their members by prohibiting as much competition as they possibly could. So under the guild system, it would not have been possible for a baker to offer bread more cheaply than his fellow bakers. It would not be possible for any one baker to employ more apprentices than others. There were limits on how many apprentices you could have, so limits on how much you could produce. There were controls on what methods of production you could employ, what type of products you could produce. So everything was totally tied up in order to allegedly provide for the economic security of the other members of the guild. Now, what do you think the effect of this was on economic progress?
Zero.
It radically reduced it. It made it go at the tiniest snail's pace. Just think, what's the effect of the labor unions you may be familiar with on economic progress as far as they have their way?
Lower.
They certainly reduce it, and imagine that the unions were put in control of what all the different companies do and what methods of production they could use. Well, then we'd be back to the days of the guild system. Now, as I say, from the perspective of the guilds, what they were attempting to do was provide themselves with economic security, but the way each of them went about it had the unintended effect of preventing economic security for everybody else. So if here we are, we have the Bakers Guild attempting to provide economic security to the bakers by preventing improvements in the production of bread and making bread more affordable to everybody. Well, what is the effect of that on the economic security of all buyers of bread? Who are deprived of the ability to get their bread better or cheaper. Are they made more economically secure, or are they prevented from being more economically secure? Yes?
Prevented.
They're prevented, obviously. And if you have the Cobblers Guild is attempting to provide economic security to the cobblers by preventing improvements in shoe and boot production, well, what's the effect of that on the economic security of the bakers, as well as everybody else? It's the same thing. Now, if we have every branch of production controlled in this way, then while each branch might feel that its own actions are making it more secure, what is the effect of the actions of all the guilds on everybody, including all the other guilds?
Less security.
Everybody is less secure, and because the guilds virtually prevented economic progress or made it a fraction of what it otherwise might have been, they made everyone much poorer than he otherwise might have been, and therefore much less economically secure. This is why I refer to the paradox of the guild system. Here they are. They're attempting to create economic security by a process that's depriving people of the ability to have bread, shoes, and everything else. That is not economic security. Now, let's deal with this next point B, competition and job security. What the guilds were really interested in would come under the heading of job security, the ability of people to go on earning their livings in their old accustomed way. And let's see why it is that if you really want job security, if you want the ability to have a job and earn an income, that what you need is not less competition, but more of it. I have a reference here, the need for fully free competition. Let's say here you are, your current job or your method of doing business is made obsolete by the competition of others. And so here you are, you've lost this competition, and you have to find another way to earn a living. What kind of system from this point on will be to your self-interest? One in which the whole rest of the system, outside of the one where you're now displaced from, where the whole rest of the system is free and open to everybody's competition, including yours, or is closed to it. If it's free and open. You see, here you are, you're displaced from your accustomed method of earning a living. You need to find another way. Well, that's not such a horrendous, horrifying prospect if you're in a system which is wide open to everybody's competition, in which every industry and occupation in which you're qualified to work, you can work, you're legally allowed to work. If that's the case, what you will do is choose the best of the opportunities open to you from an extensive range of opportunities. So you can make the adjustment much more easily. It won't be a life and death issue because you've lost the competition. But what happens to the extent that you've lost your given competition and you've lost it in a society where most of the lines of work are closed to your new, fresh competition, which you have to make in order to earn a living in another way. So here you are. You're a baker. We no longer need as many bakers because someone else is producing bread more efficiently than you can. You have to earn your living in a different way. Well, it's one thing to be in that position if you're in a society where everything is open to you and you can pick the best of the opportunities available, or to live in a society where everything is licensed or unionized and you have to start at the very bottom of the ladder and may not be able to start at all. Well, what arrangement do you need if you want to minimize the negative consequences of losing an isolated competition? A system that's free and wide open to competition, or one that's more and more closed to competition?
Free and open.
The one that's free and open. That will minimize the negative effects of losing an isolated competition. Now, paradoxically, the process of controls feeds on itself. It's one thing, as I've said, to lose a competition in a free economy. There are certain problems, but they're not life-threatening, and they can be overcome without an incredible sacrifice. But what happens as the alternative lines into which some people might go are more and more closed off? What then happens to the consequences of their losing a given competition? Imagine here you are, you've been a baker, you can't be a baker any longer, but who knows, you might go work in the shoe business, or hauling coal, or driving a truck, or God knows what. These are all things that you might be able to do and which would be open to you. Or, while you find that these are things you're physically capable of doing, that they're more and more restricted, that more and more you need a license to engage in such activity, where you have to be a union member to engage in it, and you can't get the license, or the union won't accept you. Well, what then are the consequences of your losing that competition? Then it's a life-threatening issue, perhaps. So imagine you were living back in the days of the guild system, and somehow there were a crack in the system, and some bakers were thrown out of work. What would have been the fate of those bakers in a system in which virtually everything is tied up by the other guilds? Then their lives could have been at stake. Where are they going to turn? How can they possibly get another job? Well, it's sort of ironic, but you see, the more controlled an economy becomes, the more people think they need still more controls. See, suppose here you are, you're going along, there are certain difficulties in relocating in a job, but you're prepared to tolerate them. Now the restrictions become worse. So if you do lose your present job, the consequences of losing it are much more severe, because so many other fields are tied up with restrictions. Well, how will that make you feel about protecting yourself in your given job and adding restrictions in your own field?
Want you to control that area.
Pardon me?
You feel the need to control that area.
Yeah, you'd feel that if you don't have these protections, your life is at stake. So you'd better stop any possible competition that will displace you, because if you are displaced, God help you. Well, what is the actual solution? As you find problems growing and things getting worse and worse, is the real solution to go all the way with the controls and tighten up everything, or to blast away the whole system?
Blast away the whole.
To blast away the whole system. Now, we're going down the opposite route in what we're doing. I think something very analogous and really similar. It's very likely in not too many years from now, maybe within the next year or two, we'll probably have some kind of single-payer medical care system. And what I think is the tip-off to that is when you read that corporations like General Motors, their financial results are coming in very bad because of high costs of health care. And so there are now big businesses like GM, and I'm sure many, many others, that are suffering from the health system that we have that makes them liable for payment. And what do they want to do to get out from under this burden?
Somebody else controls.
And that somebody else will be the government. So their idea is, we'll get out from under this burden. we'll shift the burden to the government. Let the government worry about it. Then we're not going to be liable. And the attempt may also come up at some point to do the same thing with pensions. And so we might end up with an extension of Social Security. But notice the reason for the very existence of these problems, the mounting healthcare costs, is because we've already interfered with the system so heavily. We made it an obligation of employers to begin with. We took away the obligation of the individual to pay his own bills, and I think we had some discussion here, did we not? What would be the effect if after this class we went over to Houston's or somewhere and had a late night snack, but our arrangement was everybody orders whatever they want and we divide the check equally. What do you think would happen to the size of the check? It would be much larger than if we were ordering for ourselves, and it's the same phenomenon that underlies the rise in medical costs. And we got into this arrangement because the government pushed us there, going as far back as World War II, and then they added Medicare and Medicaid and further restrictions. The actual solution would be to go the opposite direction, but instead, having adopted so many interferences and regulations, we'll most likely go the whole route, and we'll end up with the single-payer system. Okay, let me go further and turn to this next point, competition in the weak. More on competition in the weak. I've already made the point that people who are suffering from various diseases and disabilities, the effect of competition on them is to enable them to have the medications and the prosthetic devices and the food and whatever to overcome their problems. That's the actual result of competition. But we need to investigate this in further aspects. And let me give you a bit of history of economic thought in this connection as an introduction to the law of comparative advantage. When Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations appeared in 1776, he had made a strong case for international free trade. He argued that England will be better at producing certain things and France in producing other things, and it's to their mutual advantage that England concentrate on what it's best at and produce for itself and France do the same, producing what it's best at for itself and England. And he thought that generalizing this approach would produce benefits for all nations engaging in free trade. Now, Smith's principles implied that protective tariffs should be abolished. And there were important numbers of people in Britain who gained a lot by protective tariffs. And without the protective tariffs, their personal incomes would be radically reduced. And these were people with significant political influence. But they needed an argument to answer Smith. And they thought they had come up with one when they identified, they argued that Smith is dealing with countries like England and France, which are comparable. One is better at some things, the other at other things. But what about if you have a country that isn't particularly good at anything, a third-rate country? And they took Portugal as an example. And they projected, here's England, it can do everything better than Portugal can do. It's more efficient in the production of everything without exception. How can a poor country like Portugal possibly allow international free trade? It won't be able to compete in anything. It'll be wiped out across the board by the greater efficiency of England. And it was in answer to that David Ricardo developed the law of comparative advantage. The law of comparative advantage deals with cases in which one party or one country or one group is productively superior to the other in every relevant respect, where there are some people who can do everything better than other people. Will it be the case that the less capable people, whom loosely you might think of as the weak, that they will simply be overrun under free competition, and there will be nothing left for them to do, because the more efficient will do everything. They don't need the less efficient. Well, Ricardo argued that this would not be the case, that so long as the superior producers were unequally superior, so long as they had a greater superiority in some lines than in other lines, a mutual division of labor would still pay, and it would pay if it was conducted in the following way, and I give a statement here. Even if one party is productively superior to the other in every respect, it still pays them to engage in division of labor, with the productively superior party concentrating on his area or areas of greatest superiority, and the productively inferior party concentrating on his areas of least inferiority. So they will still pay them to have division of labor. And what this implies, if this is true, is the point with which I introduced this point 8, that there is room for all in the division of labor. There's room for everybody, even those who are not very capable, those of minimum capability. There is room for them in the division of labor, even though other people can do everything that they do better than they do it. There's still room for everybody because of the operation of the law of comparative advantage. And let's start getting into this. Let's deal first with a few illustrations of where this principle would apply. I refer, for example, to the boss and the secretary. Or another example would be a physician and his x-ray technician. Or finally, the lady lawyer and her maid. Now, what is in common with all these examples? Well, presumably, and maybe not universally by any means, but certainly fairly often, we have a boss and a secretary, and if the boss decided to learn the job of the secretary, he could do her job better than she does it. I'm sure that there are many such cases. Undoubtedly, many physicians who have x-ray technicians, if they decided to do the work of the x-ray technician, they would do it better than the x-ray technician. And certainly, if you listen to many women who work in a profession such as law or whatever, it's very common to hear them complain about the poor job done by the maid they employ to clean their home, and saying how much better a job they could do in how much less time. So I think we can assume that must be true, at least sometimes. And at the same time, the maid could not do the job of a lawyer at all. So these are all illustrations of comparative advantage. There are people who not only can do the job they're doing infinitely better than the less skilled people they're employing in a lesser capacity. The x-ray technician presumably couldn't be a physician at all. The secretary could not run the company at all, at least we can assume that reasonably. And we can assume the maid couldn't work as the attorney. Well, a question to ask is, why are these people employed? Why doesn't the physician fire his x-ray technician, do that job himself? Why doesn't the boss fire his secretary and do her job better than her? And similarly, the lady attorney. Why do they hire people even though they could do their jobs better than the people they're employing? Yes, Ms.
Because
Fox.
they can spend their time doing what they do best, which is in the physician taking care of their patients, or the boss focusing on the company.
Exactly. Employing these people to do jobs which, even though the ones who are employing them could do better, having these people are there to do those jobs, that releases the people employing them to concentrate on the areas where they have a greater advantage. So the physician who has the x-ray technician, because he has the x-ray technician, he has more of his time available to perform diagnoses, where his superiority is much, much greater. The lady attorney can devote more time to practicing law, because her time is not taken up cleaning her home. And similarly, the boss can plan the operations of the company because he doesn't have to do the secretarial work. Someone else is taking care of that. And the same point would apply in comparisons between countries. Now, I've already referred to England and Portugal. We can modernize the example. We'll update it to the US and Brazil. And we'll make the assumption that this may not be factually true, but I will make it in order to illustrate the point. We can assume that not only does the U.S. have a major advantage over Brazil in the production of manufactured products like automobiles, where we have the aid of so much more machinery and modern equipment, but we'll also assume that the United States could grow coffee with less labor than is used in Brazil. That's probably not true, but it could be true. It might be true, and we'll assume it's true. So let's make that assumption and see what we get. All right, here we are. We have the U.S. and Brazil. And we have two products, coffee and cars. In the U.S., in order to produce X of coffee, it takes 1 million man days. In order to produce Y of cars, it takes 500,000 man days. In Brazil, in order to produce Y of cars, the same quantity of cars, we assume it takes radically more labor, 5 million man days, 10 times as much labor. Now, we're also assuming, and this may not be factually correct, we're assuming that in Brazil, it would take twice as much labor to grow the same quantity of coffee. 1 million in the US, 2 million in Brazil. I'm making this assumption just to develop the implications of one country being productively superior in all relevant respects. Now, the protectionists fear that Brazil could not possibly compete against the United States because we do everything better than they do in Brazil. Okay? I want to show that even though that might be true, it is still to the material self-interest of both countries to have a division of labor. And in this case, for Brazil to concentrate on coffee, where its productive inferiority is least, and the U.S. to concentrate on cars, where its productive superiority is greatest. And I think we can demonstrate this mathematically, at least at the level of an illustration. If the two countries were both producing both products for themselves, if the U.S. was producing its own coffee and its own cars, and Brazil producing its own coffee and its own cars, and these are the amounts of labor employed, what would be the output of coffee and cars in the U.S.? Yes? Well, if the U.S. were employing 500,000 man days to produce Y of cars, how many cars would we produce? We'd be producing Y of cars. And if we were employing 1 million man days to produce X of coffee, how much coffee would we produce? X. Okay, and if Brazil were employing 2 million man days to produce X of coffee and 5 million man days to produce Y of cars, how much would they produce? X and Y. And so what would be the total combined output of the two countries with respect to both products?
2x plus 2y.
Okay, 2X plus 2Y. That would be the total product of that labor. Now suppose that comparative advantage is followed, and the U.S. Gives up the production of coffee and takes the million man days of labor away from coffee growing and adds them on to the production of automobiles. So now we have 1.5 million man days available to produce automobiles. 500,000 could produce could produce Y of cars. How many cars can 1.5 million man days produce?
Y times 3.
Well, 0.5 resulted in X, so 1.5 is how much more than 0.5? 3 times more. So what should be the output of automobiles using 3 times the labor? 3 times, it should be 3X, right? Or rather 3Y.
3Y.
3Y, okay. So the U.S. would produce 3Y of cars and zero of coffee. That's what would be produced in the U.S. In Brazil, I see I need to move the numbers down a bit, or I'll just move Brazil up. That's probably the easiest way. Okay, here we are. That makes it better. All right, the U.S. is producing zero of coffee, 3Y of cars. In Brazil, they're now producing zero of cars, but how much coffee can they produce? 2 million man days produce X of coffee. Now they're shifting 5 million man days out of automobile production into coffee production. How much can 7 million workers, 7 million man days of labor produce in coffee? If 2 can produce X, 7 should be able to produce how much? 7 is to 2 as what to what?
3.5.
3.5. So if 2 million man days could produce X, 7 million man days could reasonably be assumed to produce 3.5X. Well, if that is so, then what is the combined output of the two countries now employing the same quantity of labor?
6.5.
Well,
3Y plus 3.5.
3.5X and 3Y, which is more than 50% greater. If they were both 3, that would be 50% greater, but one is 3.5 times. So the same labor employed along the lines of comparative advantage produces substantially more. I think that's arithmetically evident. Now, we want to know, what is it that will operate to produce this result? Is this just something that would work this way if it happened? But is there anything to make it happen this way? Well, let's see what sort of thing will make it happen this way. Suppose we start off with the nightmare case of the protectionists, a nightmare for Brazil. Here we are. The United States produces everything with less labor. What assumption has to be made in order for this to translate into Brazil not being able to compete?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, here we are. The United States produces both goods with substantially less labor. What assumption needs to be made for this to translate into Brazil not being able to compete with the United States?
Well, their wages have to be proportionate with their lower productivity.
Well, if their wages are lower, that's a different story. That could enable them to compete, as we'll see. What's required to assume that if it takes them twice the labor, that means their cost is twice as high? Or if it takes them 10 times the labor, their cost is 10 times as high? What assumption is being made about wage rates? That they would be the same. That they would be the same. Now, if it were the case that the United States and Brazil both had the same level of wage rates, and here's a product that in the U.S. Takes half the labor of Brazil, and there's another product that takes 1/10 the labor of Brazil, then what will be the comparative costs? The cost of both things will be commensurately less in the United States, and Brazil will not be able to compete. Okay, well, let's start with that. Let's assume that we begin, both countries had the same scale of wage rates. And because of that, Brazil can't compete in anything. Anyone in the United States would not want to buy from Brazil. They just want to buy here in the United States. And the Brazilians would only want to buy from the United States too, right? If both countries were using the same money, if they were both using gold, let's say, as money, what would happen to the supply of gold in Brazil, and what would happen to the supply of gold in the U.S.?
Build up in the U.S. and dry up in Brazil.
Pardon me?
It would build up in the U.S. and dry up in Brazil.
Okay, the gold would be moving from Brazil to the U.S. The Brazilians are buying from the U.S. We're not, and they're not selling anything to the U.S. So gold is leaving, and gold is accumulating in the U.S. As gold is leaving Brazil, and there's very little being brought in Brazil, what would be happening to wage rates and prices in Brazil if they had a free labor market? They would be going down. Now, the decline in Brazil would almost certainly be much greater than the rise in the United States, because the U.S. is a much bigger economy to start with. But to the extent that we had more money in the U.S., what would be the effect of that on spending in the U.S. and on prices and wages in the U.S.?
Increase.
They'd be greater. So here we are, prices and wages in Brazil are going down. In the U.S., they're going up, somewhat anyway. Well, what happens when and if prices and wages in Brazil get to be half of what they are in the U.S.? What does that do to the comparative cost of growing coffee in Brazil compared to the U.S.?
It becomes more economically feasible for them to produce the cheapest cost.
Well, when it's half, if their wage rates are half of ours, but the quantity of labor they required is twice ours, then the cost would be the same. Okay, at least now they're the same in this one item. And in automobiles, instead of their cost being 10 times as high, they're now only 5 times as high. What happens if wage rates in Brazil go still lower? They go below a half. Then what happens?
More advantageous.
Be more advantageous.
Then Brazil becomes the cheaper producer of coffee. Once wage rates in Brazil, once they get to be wage rates in the production of anything that are lower by more than the required quantities of labor are higher, that country has the lower costs. And so what would happen is, as the result of the decline in wage rates in Brazil, we reach a point where Brazil starts to have the cost advantage over the United States, even though it takes more labor in Brazil. And they achieve that advantage because their wage rates are lower by enough to outweigh the greater quantity of labor they require. And in a free world market, what will happen is the wage levels of the different countries come to be adjusted in such a way that each country will have the ability to make exports comparable to its imports. There is that tendency for the costs of production in the different countries and wage rates in the different countries to come to be such that each country, even if it requires more labor to produce everything, it will make up in lower wage rates sufficiently to have an advantage in the production of as much as where it has a disadvantage. So you can see from a monetary point of view, it will pay at some point to import from the country that doesn't do things as efficiently as we do it, because they make up for their lesser efficiency with lower wage rates. And that same outcome is implied if we look within an economy, if we look within a country. What is it that would make our lady attorney employ the maid, even though she can do a better job in less time? Well, let's look at it in dollars and cents. Let's say she's paying the maid $80, $10 an hour for an 8-hour day to clean her house. But she, the lady attorney, if she cleaned her own house, she could do as good or better a job in 4 hours. Well, but when she works as an attorney, she's making $100 an hour. And if she doesn't have to put in these 4 hours cleaning her home, she has 4 hours more available to work as an attorney. What represents economic common sense here? To not employ the maid because she can do the job in half the time and she'll save $80, but at the same time have to forego $400 because she doesn't have as much time to work as an attorney, or to pay the maid $80, let the maid clean the house, even though it takes her more time and the job is not quite as good, while she has the time free, the attorney has the time free and can earn $400 in that time. Which is the better solution? Earn the 400. So the fact that she concentrates on her area of greater advantage, which gives her a much higher income, that keeps her from attempting to do the job of the maid. And we can see this on a wider basis. I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that most of the people who are working as engineers and architects and the like, if they had to drive a taxi cab, they would probably be better cab drivers than most of the people who drive cabs. maybe that's not true, but I don't think it's unreasonable to assume it's true. If that is true, is that cause for worry on the part of the cab drivers?
No.
And why not?
No.
Why isn't it cause for worry on the part of the cab drivers?
Their earnings when they're doing their other engineering and other things are
Yeah.
more.
Just think, they're doing jobs as engineers, architects, whatever, and they're earning vastly more than they could earn as a cab driver. Now, in order for them to be willing to work as a cab driver, putting aside questions of social prestige and the like, they would have to be able to earn at least as much as a cab driver. In fact, they'd have to earn more to compensate for social stigmata or whatever. They'd have to earn an income at least as great in cab driving as they earn being an engineer or architect. Well, meanwhile, here are the cab drivers, the guys actually driving cabs. What are they willing to do that job for? A small fraction. So who outcompetes whom for the job of cab driver? The cabbie. Do they have to worry about the fact that there are other people around in the society who could do their job better than them? Not in a free market, because these other people will be concentrating on their areas of greater superiority, where they earn a much higher income, and that higher income serves to stop them from attempting to compete against the less capable people. In a free market, the less capable people don't have to worry about the competition of the more capable people, because the more capable people are off doing the things of their greatest superiority, which gives them a higher income, and their need to earn a comparable income in the lines of lesser capability, lesser superiority, that reserves the field to the less capable people. And this principle works even at the greatest extremes. It enables people who are, for want of a better expression, productive morons, to be able to outcompete productive geniuses for particular jobs. And at the risk of repeating what I may have already given as an illustration, suppose we take as our example of a productive genius Bill Gates. And maybe he's making an average of $1 million an hour. I really don't know, but it's something stupendous, you can be sure. Now, it might be that if he worked as a janitor in one of Microsoft's factories, he would do that job 5 times better than the janitors they employ. Do the janitors have to worry about this? No, because here's Gates. He's making $1 million an hour, and maybe putting aside social status questions, he'll be willing to work as a janitor for $1 million an hour. And the average janitor can only do the job 1/5 as good as Gates. But how much is the average janitor willing to do the job for?
A lot less than $50 million.
Not $200,000 an hour, you can be sure. More perhaps like $10 an hour. So who outcompetes whom for the job of janitor? The janitor, hands down. You see, Gates' higher income running Microsoft keeps him out of attempting to compete in other areas where he might do the job better than the people doing it. It's in this way that competition and economic inequality together make room for everybody in the division of labor at some level of ability. There's room for the productive morons, the people whose limit of ability is pushing a broom around the floor. There's room for them. If that's the best they can do, they can still do it. There's something that they're able to do. And they don't have to worry about the competition of more capable people, because those more capable people will be earning higher incomes in other lines, and therefore not interested in competing with the janitors. It's from this perspective that I say there's room for everybody in the division of labor, people of the most minimal abilities. The structure of relative wages and prices adjusts to create room for them, to push more capable people into their areas of greater superiority. Now, there's room for every country in the world market to compete, no matter how productive the inferior it might be. Suppose we have 2 countries, one of whom can do everything with half the labor of the other country. and the other country, of course, takes twice the labor. What is necessary for the less efficient country to be competitive? If its wage rates are half as high. Now, in the real world, when you find unequal countries, they will not have a uniform superiority or inferiority. If we have a superior country and an inferior country, but the inferiority, superiority is not uniform, let's say it works out on an average, one country is twice as efficient as the other, but there are individual instances where it's 5 times more efficient, others where it's 1.1 times more efficient. There's this wide disparity. The overall average is 2 to 1. Suppose the relative wages in the different countries settle at 2 to 1. They're twice as high in the superior country, half as high in the inferior country relative to the superior one. In what cases will it pay the superior country to import? Its wages are twice as high. The other country's wages are half as high.
Labor productivity is twice as much industrial.
Well, in all those fields, what? Here we are, the wages in this country are twice as high as in another, but it takes us 0.9 times the labor. We're more efficient, it takes us only 90% of the labor, but if our wages are twice as high, where is it cheaper? In the less productive country, because our costs are going to be 1.8 times their costs. Now, in all those cases in which our efficiency is greater than 2 to 1, if our efficiency is 3 to 1, if it takes us 1/3 the labor and our wages are twice as high, well, then we're the cheaper country. The point is, there will be instances falling on both sides, and the relative wage will adjust such that each country will have areas where it's more efficient and areas where the other country is more efficient. And the relative wage will adjust to the point where each country is able to have sufficient exports to balance its imports. Now, an implication of this is, as I put it in point D, the implied dependence of international free trade on a free labor market domestically. See, many people fear international free trade. They think if we open up to free trade, what will happen to our employment rate? They think it's a threat to employment, and so therefore they're motivated against it. But you can have international free trade with full employment domestically. The only thing that's required is that the wage rates in the domestic labor market be free to adjust so that they do not exceed our relative productive superiority. You can have much higher wage rates in one country than in another, but it has to be within the limit of the country's productive superiority. If you have a country that on average is twice as efficient, well, they can have twice the wage rates, but they'll get into trouble if they attempt to impose wage rates above 2 to 1. Another country can be less efficient. It can do fine if it's half as efficient. If it has wage rates half as high, it will get into trouble if it tries to have wage rates 55 or 60% as high. So if the different countries had free labor markets domestically, they could pursue a policy of international free trade and not have to worry about unemployment in their own market. And the consumers in both countries would be benefiting from all those goods that they could then import more cheaply than those goods could be produced in their home country. What you'd have is each country would tend to expand the production of those things where it had a comparative advantage and import those things where the other country had a comparative advantage. They'd have more international division of labor. Yes?
When would tariffs be a useful tool, or do they fit into what we're discussing here in terms of capitalism, the imposition of tariffs by government?
Well, tariffs have a connection, and you can use these principles to analyze the tariffs. If we're talking about a protective tariff is imposed to stop other countries from underselling our producers. But if things work the way I've been explaining, protective tariffs hold down the standard of living. Now, it's a different story with what you could call a revenue tariff, a very modest tariff that's imposed strictly for the purposes of raising some revenue. If you have a revenue tariff, the objective is to have a low tariff, so you'll have high revenue. If you have a protective tariff, the objective is to have a tariff so high that we don't want to buy the foreign goods, in which case the government has no revenue from the tariff. So a revenue tariff is one thing, a protective tariff is a different story. And I have a note here in point E, the competitive damage to the less able of attempting to force the market to pay them the wages of the more able. Well, just think, what is the mechanism by means of which the less capable people are able to secure a place and outcompete the more capable people? What's their... Pardon me?
Affirmative action.
Well, I'm talking within the context of the market and the discussion that we've been having.
To have the wage rates low enough that they can find employment?
Yeah, they overcome their physical deficiency by means of lower wage rates. The guy who's half as capable can outcompete the guy who's more capable if his wage rate is less than half. Then he wins the competition. I think I've probably given you the example of different bricklayers. Let's say one bricklayer can lay 20 bricks an hour, the other bricklayer can only lay 10 bricks an hour. If the guy who can only lay 10 bricks an hour is willing to accept less than half the wage of the other guy, he'll be the more efficient, he'll be the lower cost bricklayer. He'll be the one who'll be employed. But suppose we want to help him. Suppose we want to help him. We want to insist that he have a living wage. And the living wage will apply to him, not to the more efficient bricklayer. And so we impose a wage that prevents him from compensating for his lesser efficiency with a lower wage. Because we prevent him from accepting that lower wage. We make it illegal. Well, then what is the favor we're doing him?
More economical to hire the more efficient bricklayer.
Then he can't compete. Then he won't have that job. He'll have no job. So is this really a favor? It isn't a favor. And the same thing is present whether you're imposing a direct wage that the guy will take home or you're trying to be nice to him in a related way. Instead of compelling the employer to pay him a higher take-home wage, suppose instead we compel the employer to buy him health insurance. How does that differ from the employer's perspective of having to pay the higher wage? What's the effect on the cost of employing the guy?
Better to go with the more efficient.
Pardon me?
It's better to go with the more efficient person.
Yeah, the cost of employing the less efficient guy is increased by having to provide health coverage, which you didn't have to do before. And so what does that do to the ability of the less efficient person to compete?
You can't find a job.
He may not be able to find a job. So have we helped him?
No.
No, we haven't. It's unfortunate that the authors, I guess, of Prop 72, is it? That's the proposition to impose health plans on medium and large employers in California. The authors of this proposal seem to have no familiarity with these considerations. Okay, let's turn now to point 9, the pyramid of ability principle. This is a kind of complementary principle to the law of comparative advantage. The law of comparative advantage shows how it's to the advantage of more capable people to cooperate with less capable people. Why it's to their advantage to make room for the less capable people, let them concentrate on their areas of least inferiority. The principle we're about to discuss right now, the pyramid of ability principle, this develops the advantages of cooperation of the less capable people with the more capable people. It shows what is the nature of the gains the less capable derive from cooperation with the more capable. And the principle is, to the degree that the more able people obtain the higher positions in the economic system, the productivity and standard of living of the less capable are increased. To the extent that the more capable are able to get the higher positions in the economy, the productivity and standard of living of the less able are increased. And let's look at this in a variety of ways. I give the example of the engineer and the mechanic. We have two people, one of whom is more capable than the other. He's capable of being an engineer. He could also be a mechanic if he wished. The other can be a good mechanic, but he doesn't have the ability to be an automotive engineer. Why is it to the advantage of the mechanic that the more capable person be the engineer and not that he attempt to be the engineer?
You wouldn't be able to compete. Right?
Well, they won't be able to compete, but in terms of who is able, potentially able to provide the other with a better automobile to work on.
Engineer can provide the mechanical worker with the better automobile.
Yeah, the automotive engineer can design an automobile that will improve the efficiency of the automotive mechanic. He'll design a better automobile. The mechanic can fix the car more easily. If we put the mechanic in the engineer's job, would he be able to accomplish the same thing for the benefit of the engineer? No, their positions could not be reversed. Their positions could not be reversed. Another example, we have an opening for a foreman. Now, there may be a better qualified person to be foreman. If we put the best qualified person in to be foreman, what will be the effect on the productivity of the workers under him compared with they'll be more productive because the right man is in that supervisory job. If we left the better qualified man down in the ranks and elevated a less qualified worker to be foreman, what would be the effect on the productivity of the people under him? That would be held down. Now, also, if we have the right person at the head of a company compared with the wrong person, what's the effect on the productivity of labor of everyone in the whole company? It'll be much better with the right people at the top. Now, if you have a society where the most capable people are in a position to start new industries, revolutionize the methods of production, what's going to be the effect on the whole productivity of labor at all levels of ability in the whole society? It'll be higher. And this, I would say, is to the advantage of everybody. It's to the advantage of everybody that the best qualified people be running General Motors and Boeing aircraft and American Airlines and all the rest. And it would actually be against the interests of everybody to attempt to prevent this. Now, if you look at things in an isolated way, I could say it would certainly be very good for me to be president of General Motors. I'd like to earn the income of the president of General Motors. Okay, well, if I got that income and were running General Motors, and I admit to having virtually no capability of doing anything remotely approaching that, what damage would I be causing to General Motors and all the buyers of automobiles? Far more than what I would earn. Now, even so, I might think, okay, I'm not going to buy a GM car, but I'll use my higher income, I'll buy a Toyota or something. Okay, if this were the only instance in the entire economy, maybe I would be better off, even though I would have made many, many people worse off. But if we start generalizing this principle, suppose we have a similar development in the airline I fly, or in the maker of the surgical stents that I might use, or anything else where my relation is that of a consumer. If we start generalizing the less capable people taking control of production, what's going to be the effect on me, even though I have one of the top jobs? Is my having that top job going to be worth a hell of a lot? No, because I will lose back in my capacity as a consumer as much or more than I've gained as a producer. It's the same sort of thing as what did it mean to be a feudal nobleman under feudalism. You're better off than the serfs, but you're still in a state of misery compared with being able to live in today's society. Now, incidentally, the pyramid of ability principle, to my knowledge, was first discovered by Ayn Rand. That's where I learned about it.
By,
Ayn Rand,
I don't know.
the novelist philosopher. Now, the pyramid of ability principle and the law of comparative advantage can be integrated together into a wider principle. That's point 10, the integration of the law of comparative advantage and the pyramid of ability principle. And what the integration is, there is a gain to everybody from the existence of other people who will cooperate with him in a division of labor. Each of us has a selfish material gain in the existence of other people who cooperate with us in the division of labor. And we have, I think, a greater gain from those who are more able than we are. In that case, our gains run along the lines described by the pyramid of ability principle. The fact that there are people more capable than we are raises our productivity. To the extent that the others are less capable than we are, our gain runs along the lines of the law of comparative advantage. Their existence frees up our time to concentrate on areas where we have a greater superiority. And I think the gains running along the lines of the pyramid of ability principle are probably greater. Literally, because of the pyramid of ability, people whose own capability would not go beyond that of being a janitor, or much beyond, they are able to regularly enjoy products that on their own they could not have conceived. It's literally true in our society. Janitors own automobiles. Some of them may own personal computers. Left to their own devices, they could never have even imagined these products. But in a society where there are people much more capable than they are, they're able to enjoy these things. Okay, that is really about all that we have time for this evening. Regrettably, I couldn't get into competition and the population question, but I do discuss it in the text, and hopefully you'll read about it there. So I look forward to seeing you all next week, and next week we'll be getting started on a discussion of monopoly.